Tom Munn's joining us. There's something I'm going to mention. Our last caller just before the break has this in common with Tom. They're flying Hawaiians. Uh, and, the other question is, why, if you lived in Hawaii, would anybody want to move to Idaho with all those beautiful... I know it's nice here. I'm not putting it down, but all those beaches, and it's warm there year-round, although it is filled with liberals. I forgot that part. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Appreciate it.
Tom is the what do you call it? You call it coordinator, right?
Yeah, area coordinator.
For the John Birch Society.
Yes.
And you're working out of Twin Falls this week.
I am.
Instead of beautiful downtown Kuna.
Yes.
Yes.
I love being here.
Yeah, well, it's not a bad place. After I got settled here and found my way around, and now I know where everything is. Those first 6 months when you move to a new place, you're always like, okay, am I going to be late? How can I get there? How do I get there? And then all of a sudden you find all these shortcuts and everything else works out. And then after a while, it's like wearing comfortable shoes. You get that feeling, that you get up in the morning and you know how everything's going to go.
Yeah.
Until, of course, noon, and then you realize that's not how it works.
No, not at all.
We want to mention Tom's going to be here the entire hour. And by the way, if you've got a comment or question for him, 208-736-0300. 208-736-0300. We're at 28. Bill Colley on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. So here's a quick question for you. I played earlier in the program some comments from this new legislator named Ben Adams. He just took office back in December, and I don't know much about him. And I was joking. I said because of his age, he's all of 30. They're probably going to try to bury him in the back of the room for the next 10 years, so he can build relationships, as they call it. But he sounds, at least for the remarks he made, like he might be. I know that you're a little wary sometimes of even people who call themselves conservatives, but what do you think of this guy?
I met him personally last year, and I've met him several times since then. And I can tell you from what I've met of him anyway, he's as solid as they come. He's probably one of the most liberty-oriented people, and especially somebody at that age. I think he's up and coming. I think he's the new face. If people that are listening are liberty-minded, we're really worried about our country. And we do what I'm suggesting to do, or that we know that we should do, and infiltrate the Republican Party, which is what we're already guilty of being accused of doing anyway, which is kind of stupid. But he's going to be the new face of the Republicans. We're going to set the Republican Party straight, and we're going to take liberty back, and we can do it. And Ben's the perfect person for the job.
You told me a story a few years back, and it stuck with me, that you were speaking with one of the Republican leaders in Canyon County, who's a lawyer, and he said, the problem with all of you people is you're too reliant on this Constitution, to which you said, well, in your daily work, don't you have to rely on it too?
Yeah.
I guess it's only convenient when they need it.
Yeah, he said, I said, because, the establishment really hates the constitutionalist people, right? And we're chastised all the time, but they never really tell us why. So, I always like to ask why. And one of the reasons I asked, I said, well, what is your problem? I mean, we're friends anyway, so he could tell me. I said, but what is your problem, or what's the general problem with people like myself? He says, you force us to adhere too closely to the party platform. And I said, well, if you're not going to adhere too closely to the party platform and you happen to be attorney, does that mean that you have that same amount of grace when you apply the law or the Constitution? And clearly you don't need an answer to that, because you can see what's going on in politics today. They don't have any adherence to any of that stuff. And they say they do, and they've got this contorted view about what our founders thought about that, except for the laws that they're imposing are in direct contradiction to what the whole point of our Constitution and our country was created for, and that was to be able to promote and perpetuate liberty.
I had a couple of years ago, Brian Smith from over in East Idaho was right there in the chair where you are right now. He was here in the studio, and he was telling me, he said that it's interesting in Idaho, he said that the constituency is more conservative than the Republicans that represent them. And I shared that with some Republicans who don't like Brian, but they said they actually agree with that. They realize that their constituents might be more conservative.
I don't. I would actually take the contrary view. I could be wrong, because the question was just posed about 5 seconds ago. But I actually don't. Our founders are brilliant people. I believe that they said that the people get the government they deserve. So if the people are more conservative, and I will give them that, if they happen to be more conservative, then they're less active than they should be. And that's the caveat, and that's really what my message is everywhere, is that if you think that you're conservative and you feel you're conservative, number one, ask what conservatism is, because there's a variety of different conservatives, right? There's neoconservatism, which is Trotskyite style Marxism, which I believe that the establishment falls under because they don't know any better. But there's all these different kinds of conservatism. And then ask about, if you're really concerned about this country, why is it that you're not involved? Do you think that you're busy? I mean, my chapter leader in Twin Falls, she has I mean, that family is absolutely awesome. They're igniting the fire of liberty on every part of that candle. They've got a special needs daughter that they're taking care of. They juggle things in such an amazing calculated order that they've got time. And now she tells me she's starting to homeschool on top of everything else. I mean, this family is amazing. And so, when I have somebody that's a chapter leader like that, and then I ask somebody else to step up and be a leader, and they tell me, "Oh, I'm too busy," I just can't buy it. I'm sorry.
Well, I look at you mentioned people get the government they deserve. I I sometimes talk to people in politics who are fairly conservative people when they get elected, but then they'll tell you, you'll hear this line like, well, now I have to represent all the people. Well, if you're a conservative, some of the people aren't. Some of those people you're going to be representing in your district or your state, they are going to be socialists, liberals. So when you say I've got to represent them all, then you suddenly just said I'm going to water down my conservatism. I don't. Why are you a Republican or a conservative in the first place if that's the way you view this? Secondly, they're not going to vote for you anyway the next time. They're going to vote for their fellow traveler who gets on the ballot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I cannot fathom that mindset.
Well, I believe it's what we call a democracy mindset rather than a Republican mindset, in the fact that they believe that they're supposed to be able to do what their constituents want. Well, in reality, we're not asking what that is, and we should be asking what that is, because it would be a direct contradiction to the oath. What they're doing is they're saying we need to placate and whatever my constituents want. No, no, you took an oath. You're there to honor the oath, and the people should want you to be able to uphold your oath to the Constitution, not pass socialist programs. And that's really, I think, where the difference is for me.
Well, but you can't represent all your constituents because this morning I was just talking about a constituent here in Twin Falls who wants gun control, and but how do you do that? Because some of your constituents are really strong supporters of the Second Amendment, some aren't. Just sit there and say I have to represent all the people. It's not possible.
Well, first of all, I mean, we weren't as dumb as a nation as we are right now. So anybody that would advocate for gun control is uninformed. The sad part about it is we don't have enough people that are motivated to be able to educate people, and then we don't have those uneducated people. And I don't mean this out of disrespect, but I mean, America was founded on a rule of law. You just don't, our Constitution limited government. You don't get the choice to be able to expand the levels of the authority of government just because you feel like that should happen. It just doesn't, so when you have an ignorant populace and they say, well, we need gun control, or we need socialist programs, why don't you move to Venezuela? I mean, that's my answer. You're not an American, so don't sit there and tell me that you're an American when you believe in anti-American concepts. And the problem really it's not really their fault. It's our fault for allowing this to continue to happen. And it's time to put an end to it.
Wanted to mention Tom Munns is the coordinator for the John Birch Society, joining us here this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. At 8:13, we're back to 30, so we're going back in the right direction now. Unless, of course, you like the chill. I don't know many people who do. But we wanted to point out, too, as well, if you've got a comment or question for Tom, the number is 208-736-0300, 208-736-0300. You can also reach me by the app function on the smartphone. That is an easy way to do that, too. And so just wanted to mention I got a couple of new messages there as well, although I think they were coming in at the tail end of the last half hour as far as that goes. We got to talk a little bit about your organization's history. Of course, John Birch was a missionary killed by communists. Mm. And then the organization was founded by Mr. Welsh back, in the 1950s?
Yep, 58.
And I on YouTube, you can go to YouTube, I don't know for how much longer on YouTube, but you can find a lot of his old speeches, which are phenomenal because he is standing there 60 years ago making predictions about what's going to happen. And his accuracy rate, far better than any weatherman that I've ever seen.
He had a paper that was written called the 55 Predictions, and they all came true. And so that people are now more than ever are coming to us saying, whenever I mention the John Birch Society, whether it's getting gas or, getting food or something like that, and I'll talk to some folks and they'll say, Wow, I didn't even realize they still existed. They've really been right all along. So yeah, 55 predictions. He's 55 out of 55.
When you talk about that, and you talk about the fact that the organization's been under the radar for a number of years. I mean, when I was growing up as a kid in the '70s, we heard about it, but we didn't really know anybody who was involved. And there probably were. I grew up in a rural area. There probably were some members, but I also in the '90s, early '90s, I went to a Ross Perot event, and I came out and I was doing some interviews outside to see what people thought about Perot. And I met a guy who was a member of the organization, but he didn't want to give me his name. He was that worried. We're living in a time, even back then, 30 years ago, where people were concerned about how it's going to be perceived. But I got to tell you, Tom, that the organization's still there. How come we're not seeing more people flock to the message because of the accuracy of the founder?
A lot of people don't. There's still a lot of people that don't know that we exist. So we're not a very well-funded organization, I would say. We don't have people flocking to our organization. We pretty much take second fiddle to most other organizations that start. Most organizations will start, and you get the tea parties that start, and you got this that starts, and you got that that starts, and then they eventually die. But the John Birch Society is always here. And one of the biggest questions that I have in my own mind still today is why is it that I can't command, why can't is it I can't get a room of, I mean, I was with a group in Burley last night. Absolutely great people. It was so awesome to be there, and I'm very happy that they allowed me there. Um, but where they have 80 or 100 people show up, that's just not something that the John Birch Society does. And I think one of the things is that we have the stigma that was attached to us for 58 years. People are not really ready to be able to accept the truth for what it is yet. They're not really ready to become active. They'd rather pay money to an organization like the NRA and become a life member and say, "Hey, I'm a NRA life member," and that's their form of patriotism. And the one big question is, why do we have to pay for membership to play? And I said, well, it's just in an effort to be able to provide you with the information and the infrastructure that we
Right.
have. We have to have
Nothing's
people
really
that
free.
yeah. So I mean, there's fear, and things change over time. So I think a lot of it depends on what they hear on the news, on how active they become. We were tremendously active last year. We had a tremendous growth through our Freedom is the Cure rally that we had in Twin last year. And we're just kicking around an idea for something I think this spring, which I think could be fun. It'll take it to an unusual level, but there's a variety of different reasons. A lot of it too, I think, is that we're a very intellectual organization, so it involves a lot of reading, and a lot of Americans don't read. I mean, to the degree that they should. We've got two magazines that come out. A magazine includes two 50-page magazines every single month in addition to a monthly bulletin with an action summary.
We've got a caller with us, and caller, you're up. You're up next. We got about 2 minutes before the break. You're on the air on KLIX.
Good morning. This is Pete Colson, and I just appreciate the refreshing perspective on things and just reminding us to be critical thinkers, and I just appreciate that perspective. So thank you so much.
We appreciate your membership.
Yeah, yes. One of my regulars, by the way, on air. One of my favorite people, and he keeps a very open mind about things too. See, that's another key to all of this.
It is.
Well, you referenced the publications. I'm familiar with the New American. Mm-hmm. What's the other?
The John Birch Society Monthly Bulletin. So it's just it comes out once a month. It's got a forward by our CEO. It's got some action programs that correlate with our action agenda. We have action summaries, and I think where the most success that we have with the communists hate us so much is the fact that we're very orchestrated nationally, and we all implement the same action items at the same time, maximizing our effectiveness.
Well, you referenced the New American, and for people who want a subscription, just go online, right? You can find it online and order it.
Yeah, you can go to thenewamerican.com and subscribe if you're interested in being engaged. See, the part of the problem is that we've got education as part of the problem, and being active is another part of the problem. So if you're interested in just reading, the question I'm going to ask you is, I mean, if we can be frank together here today, what do you plan on doing with the information? I mean, I don't know how to say this I can say this with a lot more fervor, but Bill hasn't had me on very often. Ladies and gentlemen, we're at war, okay? We're in an information war. The more people that the majority carries the narrative. So if there are a few of us that hide in our cubbies and we read magazines and we obtain information, what good are you to the cause? it's great to be. I mean, if you're going to be doing PowerPoint presentations for me, or you're going to speak publicly, or you're going to do those kinds of things, those are wonderful things. But I'm telling you, if you're going to sit there and you're not going to be involved in what you're doing with the information, I would say bury the subscription. The subscriptions are $49 a year. If that's really what you want to do, that's fine. But become a member. I mean, it's $87 a year. It's $7.23 a month. You can do a quarterly membership, which I don't think is available online. You'll have to meet me for that, or meet
Well,
Liz.
hold that thought. We've got to get to a break. It's almost 8:20. We're at 29. Tom Munn's joining us, coordinator for the John Birch Society. Bill Colley as well on KLIX. Tom Munn's coordinator for the John Birch Society, joining us on this edition of Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. 31 at 8:23. Bill Colley with you, too. And the number, if you'd like to reach the program, is 208-736-0300, 208-736-0300. And I do want to point out, too, as well, you can reach us if you've got the app on your smartphone. You can drop us a line that way, too, as well. You mentioned we're in a war. I mean, the culture war. I was just talking about this in the last hour. Some of the goofiest things that come out of these culture warriors, what they're trying to do to this country. And 20, 30 years ago, no sane person would have gone along with some of these things. And yet now, if you don't go along with it, you lose your job. You might lose your home. Tom, you're right. We're in a fight. But the question is, how do you fight back?
Well, I actually, it's the most common question that I get, and most people usually don't like my answer. But I'll put it to you this way from a democratic standpoint, since most people believe that we're a democracy. If you know what a democracy is, you know that majority rules, right? You know that, but in this particular instance, if one could argue that liberty is the majority in this country, then that really poses a serious problem, and we should actually have that finger pointed directly at us more so than we should have that finger pointed at anybody else because we allowed it to happen. You know, when we have the issues that we have, if we're the majority, why are we letting this happen? I mean, for example, you know, you have in Boise, when I'm on the radio, I call almost every day. You know, it's just me. I don't have very many other people that talk about the things that I talk about. Most of them talk about the problem, but we don't really talk about why and connecting all the dots, which is the part that I really love about the radio. But we have people here that, like you were saying, you have a well-informed area. I mean, these people they should be slamming the radio stations. They should be going down and visiting with the media. They should be building relationships with their police chief and their officers and their commissioners. You guys have, I mean, I'm from out of town, but I'll tell you what, I am more friendly with the people, or the Twin Falls government is more friendly to me than any other government that I have. Now, granted, some of them are friendly, but I don't have anything like the relationships I have with the people in Twin Falls, the police chief and the sheriff and the commissioners and you know, and those kinds of things, and even the coroner. I mean, you know, and I love Twin Falls for that, and it helps me realize that, oh, if those are the kinds of people that we have in Twin Falls, if what I believe is true, then Twin Falls is doing something right because they have people that they voted into office that seem to really care about what they're doing.
Mark Stein had a column. I found this today earlier while I was getting ready for the show, and I didn't have time to really get through it. But he said, he's asked oftentimes, what do we do? He said, first thing is you better know your enemy.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I say all the time.
Yeah. And in order to do that, you know, that gets back to research. Mm-hmm. We'll grab a telephone caller if we've got a moment here. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX with Tom Muntz.
Good morning, Bill. My name is Dennis Hakes. I know this gentleman, Tom Muntz, and I find him to be a true patriot. And I've got a question for Tom.
Put me on the spot.
As you travel around the state or around your area, Tom, where's your favorite location to visit?
Actually, the Twin Falls area is my favorite. I currently have, I call it East, West, Southern Idaho. I also have Oregon all the way out to Bend, and they just expanded my territory into Carson City and Reno. But ultimately, like I said, I mean, Twin Falls has treated me with more respect. The people are awesome. The group that you guys had last night was absolutely amazing. I mean, the spirit in that room was amazing. and it was just really great to be included almost as a family member. Just about anywhere I go in this area, and so I'm very, very thankful to Twin Falls, and that's what makes me feel like I have standing in Twin Falls. You know, it makes me feel like if I have friends out here and they're working and they don't have the time to do the things that they need to do, then tell me what it is you want me to do. If you want me to go to your sheriff or your police chief, if you want me to go to your mayor, if you want me to go visit somebody, if you have people that you need me to visit and you have an issue, I mean, people bear their soul to me. I never asked for it, but it's one of the most amazing things that's ever happened to me because I realize that there's a level of trust that people have for me, and I'm very, very honored to be able to have that. And so when I have that kind of trust, it allows me to be much more trusting of the area that I am, and that relationship really begins to blossom. So yeah, the Twin Falls area is amazing, and Twin Falls area to me includes, Murtaugh and Hazleton and all the way out to Burley. So you know, that's my area. That I've divided my area into zones.
I want to thank Dennis for the call. You referenced the expansion of your territory. I went out. I spent a week in Bend on vacation and just toured the area last October, I guess it was. And what's funny is everything until you get to Bend is probably receptive, but Bend has become a miniature version of Portland, or so it seems that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it goes back to the fact that we've allowed this to happen. We're asleep at the wheel. I mean, I think what was it? Benjamin Franklin told Mrs. Powell that we have a republic if we can keep it. Most people focus on the republic part, but you should focus on the if you can keep it part. And so, being active in means that you have to live like this is your last day of being a free person. This is the last day you're going to eat. This is the last day you're sleep. This is the last day you're going to go to work. This is the last paycheck you're ever going to have. This is the last time that you're going to be able to kiss your kids goodbye, or the last time you see your kids before you kiss your kids goodbye, before you shackle them with debt and they spit on your grave. I mean, ultimately, I would expect nothing less from my kids if I wasn't active in pursuit of liberty in this fight, because our kids are the legacy that we give our kids. They deserve this.
We've got more coming up with Tom Munns, coordinator for the John Birch Society. It's almost 8:30. We're at 32 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. But of course, if you want to get in touch with us after the break, 208-736-0300. Tom Munns, sometimes I refer to him as Idaho coordinator, but now that he's doing both Oregon and Nevada on top of that, he is, I'll call him the Mountain West coordinator for the John Birch Society, at least a good portion of it. Maybe in the Great Basin, part of that too. They better get him a better car. Something newer, maybe.
Yeah.
It's pretty new, though, as it is. Hey, we're at 8:34. We're at 32 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The number again, 208-736-0300. Bill Colley on Magic Valley this morning. And caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Tom Munns.
Morning, guys. Hey, we talk about liberty, and I like to think about liberty now as kind of capital L. It's not this, kind of silly thing that we use, the word that we just use, and trying to define it sometimes is a challenge. But this last year, I think really in my mind, and I always thought I was a pro-liberty guy, but I think this last year really kind of set it in stone for me. And I just wanted to share this with you guys and we comment on it a little bit. The ability to go to work and the ability to go to the store, just silly little things like that. And you realize that this isn't a passing game. This is stuff that you have to be active on a daily basis, or we slip into this ridiculous system where, some of us are essential and some of us can go to work and some of us, we can go to some stores when we want to. To me, I think that this last year that really set in stone what liberty is. I just looking for some comment. I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks. Thanks for the call. I can only say that liberty to me is, people get into this idea about, well, what's freedom and what's liberty and all that, and people have different ideas of what liberty and what freedom are. And so for me, I basically say that I either have the freedom, government's either in my face or it isn't. And if it is in your face, there's no freedom there. There's no liberty to go about and do the things that you want to do. And that's where my delineation is. I try to make it pretty simple. Right now we've got I'm hoping that I can get into this before I'm done today, but most of the time people talk about the problems that we have. Oh, well, we've got immigration and we've got this problem and we've got problems with this and we've got problems with that, but nobody ever talks about why. And that's the thing that I really like to talk about is exactly why it's happening, where it comes from, and what we can do something about it. So the fact that you're even on the air talking about liberty is something to be absolutely commended, because what you don't realize is that there's a strength in you for picking up the phone and making the call, although it may seem insignificant to you, to be able to broadcast your voice over the entire airwaves of anybody listening in the Twin Falls area. You should be highly commended for that, because I'm telling you, 95% of the people that I talk to, when I ask them about getting on the air and starting to speak, they refuse to do so.
It's not easy the first time.
No, I mean, I actually started by writing, I was listening to the subject matter, and then I would write 2 sentences on my little memo pad. And then when they answered the phone, I read it and I hung up. I mean, but it's a great way to train yourself. And then when you become more confident in just realizing that it's okay to make mistakes, and I mean, it really is. I mean, we're just people. I'm not, I'm not an expert. I always thought, oh, people on the radio are, experts. I mean, I was fretting last night. I'm like, I just got home at 11:30, and I'm like, oh, I didn't prepare for my thing with Bill, and I'm like, oh, who cares? I mean, I love my country. I love Idaho. I love the people in Twin Falls. I mean, we have a really big problem that we need to face, and I want to be part of the solution. And if you want to be part of the solution, then we should be meeting and talking about it.
I used to work with a syndicated host called Lionel, and I don't even know if he's still in radio any longer, but he used to joke. He told me one time, he said, you get one of these things, this microphone, it makes you an expert in all sorts of things. People actually think you know it. They'll call up, they'll ask your advice on something, and you're like, I come from a dysfunctional family and have led a pretty dysfunctional life. I am not the guy to be giving you any personal advice. We got about a minute before the break. Can you reiterate membership costs for people if they're thinking of the JBS?
So you can go to jbs.org. You can call and meet me. I think I'm pretty well open tomorrow, except for the chapter meeting I have tomorrow night. But jbs.org/join. Our memberships are $87 for a single, $99 for a couple. We do have a quarterly membership. I just found out yesterday that option is not available online. But if you happen to be somebody that would that maybe doesn't have the funding to be able to write a $100 check, we've got a lot more quarterly memberships. The quarterly is $22 a quarter, but we have to have your credit card, or $25 for a couple.
Sure. Hey, we wanted to mention too as well, Tom's going to be with us until 9 o'clock this morning. It's 31 right now. Coming up on 8:39 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Just after the news at 9, Dr. Shane Hunsaker going to be joining us from the Hearing Doctors of Idaho. He's talking about some people out there who are trying to scam folks right now when it comes to their hearing aids, because you have a lot of people making a lot of offers, but the product they're selling you might not be worth, well, you think you might be saving a few dollars. You're going to be wasting a few dollars if you buy it. That's on the way too as well. And then Tom has some things he does want to touch on in the next segment of the program, as he just referenced. We'll get to that in just a few minutes after the break, right here on Magic Valley This Morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Tom Munns, area coordinator for the John Birch Society, joining us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 33, it's 842. And we've got I'll give you the number again. It's 208-736-0300. You can also reach us if you've got the app on your smartphone too. And Bill Colley with you until 10 a.m. on Magic Valley This Morning. Before, you had some things you wanted to talk about and close on too, but before we get to that, I have friends who can recall when they were kids going to John Birch camps. And so they grew up in that environment, and then they grew up and they stayed they remained members and the like. I'm told that even Butch Otter used to teach at some of these camps at one time in his life, and then he had to be the governor of everybody. but in a sense, you've got to recruit young people, because a lot of your members have been there since the beginning. And let's face it, we don't all live forever. So you've got to find young people who are interested and get them involved.
Yeah. Well, that was when I first started 7 years ago. I think this is my 7th year. Most of the people were in the 70s and 80s, like you'd suspect, right? Oh, those Birchers,
Right.
And the communists would say, oh, when the octogenarians die off, then the John Birch Society will die off. Well, I mean, we're happy to say that in the last 7 years, I mean, we just signed on an 18-year-old member, a 21-year-old member. We've got coordinators now that are in their 30s. Art Thompson, our CEO, that was replaced with Bill Hahn. I think Bill is in his 40s. Our entire media department is in their 20s. And our membership is becoming much younger as well. And so I think we have one of the youngest kids in the country that's actually a member here in Twin Falls. So yay, Twin Falls.
Art, by the way, even though he was, in that area of 80 years old, this guy did not need a prompter. I mean, I would watch the videos and he would just start breaking down a subject, no ums or ahs. I mean, and just he'd walk you through it and you'd sit there at the end and you'd go, okay, I get it.
I'm not one of those people. I was so panicked last night trying to figure out how to come in here. I've got my book and I've got 20 pages of notes, and I'm like, man, if somebody asks me a question, it's going to be buried in here.
Hey, we've got a caller with us, and caller, you're next. You're on the air with Tom Munns from the John Birch Society.
Yes, good morning, and hello, Tom, and thank you, Bill, for having Tom Munns on.
Sure.
Hey, I just want to put a plug in for the John Birch Society. I've been a member for almost 30 years. And I have learned so much from this organization. You can't ask for a better publication than the New American Magazine. If you just have that magazine in your home, I know it's intimidating for a lot of people, but it has so much information on so many subjects, and it's always the most research documented. They've never had to retract anything that they've ever printed. Can you imagine that? Anyways, I just want to also tell everybody how grateful I am that Tom Munns is our leader here, and so much he does. He is the most dedicated person to the cause of liberty that I know, and I really would like to be more like him. And I just want to, everybody has something to contribute. Everybody has something that they can offer the cause of liberty. It might be writing letters. It might be calling. It might be just telling people. It just inviting, and everybody needs to do this, because the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. We cannot say, okay, I'm done today. I'm not going to worry about my liberty anymore. Unfortunately, we have an enemy, and he is here, and he's ever present, and he that wants to destroy this great country. And I've seen miracles happen in the 30 years I've been a member. I have seen constitutional conventions come to a shutdown because of one member that got involved, and he got other people involved, and we stopped that train. And so many things could have destroyed our country years and years ago.
Sure.
But it was the work of a few people that made a huge difference. Look what happened with our country. It was not a lot of people that stood up for freedom. It was a handful of founding fathers that put their lives on the line. And that's what we need to do. We need to galvanize our love for liberty, get involved, do your part, even if it's just a little speck. Those little specks can make a beautiful mosaic. And I'll tell you what, I am so grateful that Robert Welch was inspired 63 years ago to form this organization and put his wealth, his reputation, everything on the line for it, because he could see the hand writing on the wall, and now it's ever present around us. It's all the time. And the only thing we can do to counter the negative is to work, and to work in a positive way. And Tom Munns has shown me how that is done. So I encourage all of you, if you ever want to get involved in a great organization, this is the one. This is the one that has stood the test of time, and it is organized all over this country. And it's just got,
Right.
It just goes to the core of the problem. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the call. She references, that we're battling evil, and I don't know if she's talking Satan or Joe Biden. I guess one works for the other. I'm sorry. It's 8:48. Tom Munns is joining us this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. It's 32 on Magic Valley this morning with Bill Colley Thomas, the area coordinator for the John Birch Society. So you've got some and again, Liz is she's not a young person, but she's not an old person. So, she bridges that gap between perhaps generations involved with the organization.
She's got the energy of a 21-year-old and probably looks like she's 30.
Yeah, got to see her at an event a few weeks ago, a couple of months back. You were mentioning earlier, there's something you wanted to mention. We had a caller, you wanted to bring this up, and we were coming near the end of the break, and we only got about 10 minutes left, and I don't want to cut you short on that.
Well, thanks. Ladies and gentlemen of Twin Falls, your Congressman Simpson is at enmity with you, whether intentional or through ignorance. I believe it's the first one, but I have a basis for that. You know, when we're on the radio, a lot of people call and they say, "Oh, well, you know, it's about the borders, it's about the wall, it's about immigration, it's about drugs, it's about, you know, guns, it's about trade, it's about our finances, it's about COVID, it's about surveillance, it's about gender, it's about the environment, it's about grants to foreign countries, it's about borders." I mean, it's about all of these things. There's one common thread that everybody needs to understand, and I don't want to sound like I'm self-righteous when I say that, as if many of you don't, because many of you do, but I'm appealing to those that don't in this particular instance. Agenda 21 is now called Agenda 2030. It's the United Nations Agenda 21. It began in 1992 with the Rio de Janeiro conference. I have the book I've read 4 times. I've highlighted it very well, as Bill can see. And I'm here to warn you about what Mike Simpson is doing. Mike Simpson in Congressional District 2 wants to be able to breach dams in an effort to be able to end the salmon wars, which is a lie from the pit of hell. I believe it's a lie from the pit of hell, only because when you go to his website and he talks about the fact that he's had 500 meetings, I guess, with all of these different stakeholders. Now, it's important for you guys to know that you're not a stakeholder. Stakeholder is a term that comes out of Agenda 21. Stakeholders are UN certified NGOs. NGOs are non-governmental organizations. It's important that you understand the history of this. I was very, very freaked out about trying to come to you with this kind of information. Idaho has 12 experts. You have one in Twin Falls that is an absolute expert. And if you want more information on how the depths of that, you can go to channelingreality.com or the technocratic tyranny. But here's the thing that we need to understand. Most of all of these things that we're dealing with are global in nature. It's not just some school board that decided to be able to corrupt your children. This goes all the way, I mean, you can go back to, if you want to know where sexual deviations came from, watch the Kinsey syndrome on YouTube. But you better pray first, because it's gonna quicken your soul, and it's gonna take you years to be able to get that out of your head. So Agenda 21 is real. If you go to Mike Simpson's website and you read his salmon page, then I would encourage you to be able to just to read. Sad to say, but Agenda 21 is a 351-page document. You're not going to understand what this is until you read the document, or unless I can somehow find a way to abbreviate it, or somebody that has read it can abbreviate this for you. So I really don't know what kind of information I can give you other than the foundation of where Agenda 21 came from, what it does, the 27 principles that are behind Agenda 2030. If you look up Agenda 2030, I type in 2030 PDF, 27 principles PDF. It'll take you to a UN document that will talk about the fact that that the UN is going to be in ultimate control, and it is going to measure, monitor, and manipulate every part of your life. It sounds like it's crazy, right? So people are like, oh, well, that Tom, he's kind of a crackpot. But in reality, when you understand and you've read the documentation, you're going to be able to understand what sustainable development is. You're going to understand terms like stakeholder, what smart technology is, or what's, smart growth. You're going to learn about all of these different terms, and the terms are right there on Simpson's website. I would encourage you to go to Simpson's website, read about the salmon, look at the terminology that he's used, go to the 2030 agenda. If you want to learn a little bit more, go back to Agenda 21. And then I would encourage you to go to the World Economic Forum's website and look at their platform and look at their agenda, and tell me if you think that the John Birch Society or myself is some crackpot that's talking about the new world order that doesn't exist. Everything from the technocratic surveillance state to the forced vaccines, which has endless possibilities of measuring and tracking every move you make. It's got the ability to prevent you from going anywhere. I mean, most people don't even know. I was talking to a guy from Germany the other day. He says you can't even leave your house without a passport. Well, we don't know about that. So we've got this whole thing in Germany starting all over again, and yet Americans are so stupid, or we're so busy, or we're so led astray that we have no idea about what's happening. So I don't know how far into detail I can go with this, but if we need to stop this, we need to stop every instance of this. The children, the funding that you're getting, the funding that is going to the schools is going to be able to propagandize your children with environmentalism and gender confusion. Those are all principles in Agenda 21. All of this is the mechanism for the United Nations to be able to implement a full global government. Now, here's the thing. Also consider this. The world government has always talked about doing two things. One of them is abolishing God, and the other one is creating a one world government. I mean, when you have David Rockefeller, I think in his book Memoirs, he basically says that if that's the charge against me, I stand guilty and I'm proud of it. You have J. Edgar Hoover. He was the director of the FBI. He basically, in paraphrasing, he said the average American will not have any idea how to be able to conceive the magnitude of the conspiracy that's before us. You've got the communists. You've got a Yuri Bezmenov video that was talking about Sovietization. I mean, that was an amazing video. I've watched it over and over and over again. And to be able to watch, and any dictator in history would be absolutely proud of what's happening in America. And America feels like somehow this is, it's not going to happen here. Folks, it's here.
Well, you bring that up, and I watched a video on Friday, about 18 minutes in length, and Naomi Wolf is a well-known liberal, but she's now starting to echo the same things. And she says this device we all carry around now, this smartphone, will have an app with all of these passports on it. And that'll register everywhere you go and beep whenever you go somewhere. And if you don't have the vaccine, you're not going to get out and about. And I know you've been warning about these things for a long time. But when people on the left, some of them are starting to recognize it and say, wait a minute. This is serious stuff. This is not fiction.
Well, and this is where I want to be able to temper some of the Liberty people or some of the Republicans. The John Birch Society has been attacked by Republicans more than we've been attacked by Democrats. Now, you should really think about that for a minute. And so I'd like, before I go, to be able to give you guys some action items. But it's important that you understand that, number one, we've never been on the wrong side of an issue. People have hated the John Birch Society. Frank Vandersloot wrote articles against us. Representative Hartgen wrote slam letters against us. Sheriff Ozzie out of Spokane County. I mean, we've been right, folks, and it's time to be able to step up and realize that and to be part of the solution.
Got about 90 seconds. You mentioned action items.
The action items. The Republicans have accused us of taking over the Republican Party, so now I'm going to openly advocate that we do so. Okay? Most of us, we're stuck in a two-party system, and I hope I can get this off. We have two choices, Democrat or Republican. If you don't like your Republican Party and we've only got two systems, you're forced to vote Republican. The only way you're going to be able to change this is to be able to get involved. So you need to get involved. You need to start at a precinct committee position. And if you have any wherewithal in your soul and you have any financial ability, you need to run for office. Once we can take over those central committees, the establishment's they're going to have no choice but to run.
I was going to say, we're seeing that done in some parts of the state already.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's been gradual, and then all of a sudden it reaches a tipping point, and it suddenly it just comes pouring out.
Yeah, well, North Idaho was like that. And then we ended up, we've got our North Idaho coordinator up there. He's bringing on 30 members a week. And Robert Welch said that if we had the power of 500 and we had 500 in every legislative district, we could write our government in one election. So it's really important that we become educated and we become active and realize that, that being as individuals, it's tough for us to be collective, but we have to learn that the only way to be able to win is to be able to join hands with other people.
We got to do this again soon.
I love it. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate your time.
I want to thank Tom Munns for joining us this morning. We've got the Hearing Doctors of Idaho just after the news at 9 o'clock. It's 8:58. We're at 34. Tom is the coordinator for the John Birch Society in this region. And you're listening to Magic Valley This Morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX.